Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're with us today. We have a guest who is going to help us with toddler sleep issues. Her name is Courtney Zentz, and she is a sleep expert. And she owns Tiny Transitions, which is an online sleep coaching company. And she's going to talk to us all about the toddler sleep issues and how to solve them. With that, let's get to Courtney.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about sleep because sleep is something that toddlers, it seems like, well, every age can struggle with, but when we have a kid who is not sleeping, it seems like we're desperate for information.
Absolutely. And I always say sleep is the foundation for which the house is built.
Oh yeah, totally. That's a great saying. I love that. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I have been a certified pediatric sleep consultant since 2015. I built Tiny Transitions now to offer a variety of services. We have a membership program, we have one-on-one coaching, we do children and adults, and I have 8 folks on my team, different specialties and backgrounds to try to really find the right coach for a person's particular challenges.
Love that. So everybody has a different area that they excel at so that everybody can find the right fit. That's great. Okay, so as we said, sleep is so important. And I think we don't put a lot of thought into it unless we are not getting enough, right? Or it's disrupted. How much sleep should toddlers be getting?
I would say toddlers is a broad term, right? Because it kind of
Yes.
starts around the age of 2 and can go really through the age of 4. Anywhere I would say between, for that range, you're looking at about 11 to 14 hours in total sleep, meaning that if they're still napping, which some kids after 3 don't, but many after 3 do. When I talk about total sleep, it's within a 24-hour period. So if your toddler is still sleeping, they should all, at that point be on 1 nap a day. So it's usually like 1 nap that's roughly around 2 hours. And then somewhere between 11 and 12 hours overnight is the easiest, most generic answer for all ages.
Love it. Okay. So there's a lot of challenges with sleep in the toddler years. What things can cause sleep disruptions?
Oh gosh. I mean, every age and stage is different. And the easiest way to break it down is like newborns, right? That's sleep shaping. A child is born and we can slowly teach them the good ways to settle to sleep without ever having to sleep train, without any tears, because people always get up in arms about that. It's really just education. Parents have such a lack of education with the newborn area because you come home with this baby and go, what do I do? Right? Infants, right? When you look at them, it is an aspect of sleep training. They're deficient in a skill. And when you're deficient in a skill, you get training to understand that you possess the skill that you didn't know you had and that you actually are pretty good at it. Oh, and that it's actually easier once you have the skill to do the thing you're trying to do, right? So I often kind of bucket infants, which are really between 4 months and around 18 months into that range. Toddlers, we talk about starting at 2 up, but I will say around 18 months, they start to have an opinion about what they're doing and how they're getting it done, right? And they know how to sleep, right? Most toddlers have slept or could sleep if, right? Sometimes they could sleep if they're laying next to mom and dad. Sometimes they could sleep if there's no thunderstorms, right? Sometimes they could sleep if dad puts them to bed, but if mom puts them to bed, they're up 7 times at night, right? So I think there's a lot of variables. Some kids we'll just learn to sleep well and have that. But I think it becomes more with toddlers of behavior modification, right? They're trying to learn a sense of independence. As parents, we're trying to foster that independence, but we're also tired, man. And if they come in at 2 a.m. and the easiest way to get them back to bed is either like lay with them or have them come into our bed. And then a couple months later, you're like, how did we get to this place where like I am getting kicked out of my bed every night because my toddler's kicking me in the face? I think a lot of parents kind of get to that point by accident because maybe a kid was sick and then they sort of did their best as parents, which I totally encourage to like help make sure a child's comfortable and then it never goes away, or teething and never goes away, or a nightmare never goes away. So I think it's always accidental, that it happens in many cases, but it can be a prolonged issue that sticks around if we're willing to continue to do those things because it's a behavior, it's a learned behavior. Like if I do X, I know I'm going to get Y. And if there's no consequence to doing X, why would I stop asking for Y? You know,
Mhm.
so it's a little bit of a balance.
Yeah. And there's so many things that happen that as parents that we are not necessarily inviting into our sleep schedule too, like teething, right? It just happens. It's part of normal development. Or I know that with my kids, sometimes going on vacation is so disruptive to sleep schedule where you're changing time zones and changing location and not having those consistent routines. But then also, like you said, being sick and those things that some of it we can't help a lot. And so that can cause disruption. So what do you think are the keys to getting toddlers to sleep well?
So the biggest thing is avoiding overtired. You know, I think we talk a lot in the profession about balancing sleep pressure, right? There's blog posts on ideal wake windows and sleep pressure and the term adenosine, which is a neurotransmitter that helps regulate, you know, the sleep wake cycles. And a lot of people mess up the schedules, right? And kids are over committed, overexerted, and then
Mhm.
are overtired. And that single word, overtired, from the time you have a newborn through the time you have an 18-year-old will disrupt sleep every single time. So I think
Mhm.
overtired is probably the biggest catch-all for where disruption happens, because overtired equals overstimulation, right? Your brain is trying to help you stay awake because it believes you're trying to, when your
Mhm.
body's like, oh my gosh, I'm so exhausted, like I just want to go to bed. And so I think that managing the right schedule for a child and understanding that, you know, all these little activities, as insignificant as they seem, can lead to overtired as the first base foundation. And then I think it's consistency in how, as parents, we respond to whatever that kind of disruption is.
Mhm. So, how do we get back to our routine when it is disruptive? Let's say a kid gets sick, right? So we have a really solid routine, and then a kid gets sick and winds up in our bed or whatever it is. We fall asleep because they're up till 2 a.m. and so we fall asleep in the bed next to them. How do we get out of that?
I think the great analogy to start is be accessible, but not excessive, right? And that's how I explain it to the toddler families we work with, right? You're always accessible. You are always accessible to your children when they need you. They should always feel confident and comfortable to find and get you if they need something. I never want a child to feel like, oh, I can't go in and wake mom or dad up, or I can't call for
Mhm.
them, or I'm locked in my room. I would never, ever, ever, ever suggest that. Sometimes we do have to put a baby gate on the door if a 18-month-old can jump out of the crib and we don't want them rolling down into the kitchen at 2 a.m. by themselves. But other than that, you know, a child should always be, you know, accessible. And so I think that's important. A lot of times what happens is things go off the rail when maybe you had this great routine and structure and consistency. And to your point, like, it seems like half of our school district right now has pneumonia, right? So kids are coughing, they're up, they feel gross, you know, and it's the end of summer here. Like, it's weird that pneumonia is like a thing right now, but like a ton of people have it. So you have like illness. RSV is common in babies, right? And so you get all these different illnesses and teething and flus and shots and all these things, right? And what happens? Well, kid wakes up, oh, my, you know, my arm hurts, my stomach hurts, I just threw up. As parents, we want our kids to feel comfortable, right? Comforted, comfortable. So we end up holding them, and maybe we're holding them because they were puking or they have to be upright from, you know, an eating standpoint or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're rocking them, right? And you're trying to make them feel comfortable, and you're tired and they're tired, and then they fall asleep on you, right? Or to your point, in bed next to you, or you get into their bed because they had a nightmare. And, you know, one of my clients the other night had a nightmare about Halloween. They saw something on the TV and they hadn't woken up in years. And the client was like, whoa, how do I handle this? Like, it happened last night and I kind of was muted in my response, but I didn't know what to do or how much to give because they were obviously a bit visibly shooken. And I said, you were perfectly right to respond and offer comfort and reassure them and maybe turn a little nightlight on so they feel good. So you're always accessible, but just don't be excessive. Like, if you start like, all right, okay, it's okay, it's okay. And let me rub your back and rub your head. And I'm going to lay here all night and we're going to cuddle all night. And you know what I mean? I'm with you. And then tonight you're like, I don't want you to feel sad. So I'm going to do it again. Right. I think it's where you teeter, and sometimes it happens by accident. Like, you teeter from trying to be that accessible to just jumping over the line, right? And I think if parents can always peripherally go, I'm accessible but not excessive, you can kind of manage it. You know, I think in being sick, it's hard because sickness can prolong for a couple of days, right? Where it's like, well, for 5 nights, I've now held you upright in the recliner. I've not slept. So as a zombie parent that I am, but I want my child to feel comfort, right? And then when that first night happens and the child is better and you put a 2-year-old back in their crib for the first time in 5 days, it can feel like a little prison cell to them, right? They're not comfortable. Who the heck doesn't want mommy, you know? And so I think with that, it is looking at, okay, first of all, are they ready to go back into the independence? Are they feeling better? Are they over the illness, right? And then as parents, what are we willing to do that's within a boundary, right? Kids are going to constantly, as they grow, especially as toddlers, seek independence. They want to put their own shirt on or put their own shoes on or pick their pajamas or pick the books, right? And if parents, we were just like, go to this massive bookshelf with 300 books or even 20 books and pick one, it can be overwhelming to a toddler, right? Because they're going, oh, this one, oh, this, oh my God, oh, I'm gonna get to read one, right? And then they get in this emotional like downward spiral because they're overwhelmed with the freedom of choice, right? Whereas if I just said, you can pick this book or this book tonight, Billy, which one would you like to read, right? Giving kids choices can help them feel more in control of the situation. So they're not so overwhelmed with like the freedom of, you know, the choices. And when a child is ready to kind of go back to their bed, whether it's a bed or a crib, it's helping to reaffirm that same type of boundary. Like, look, I'm willing to sit next to the bed, but I am not going to get in the bed, right? And then what happens? Right? And like everybody starts freaking out and protesting. It's like, no, you're now better. I am right here. You can choose me here or not at all, right? And you have to, as parents, sort of go, what am I willing to do as a parent that I'm willing to be consistent with every night that's also acceptable to all of us getting sleep, and it's not getting in your bed, right? And I'll tell you, I'm 43. And a great example of this is my husband will rub my head. Sometimes I'm like narcoleptic. I can fall asleep in 2 seconds based on the day job, but I'm very lucky in that, right? So I can lay down, plop my pillow up, bend my right leg, pass out, right? Sometimes I want my head rubbed. Now I know as a grown woman, if I go, hey, can you rub my head? And he's already flipped over, looked at the closet, I've missed my window. Okay, he'll go, nope, missed it, too late, I'm going to bed. If I whine for a solid 8 seconds, guess who gets a head rub? Me. And I'm a grown woman. And I don't do it often, but I'm like, if I want a head rub, I'm just going to whine for 8 seconds. You'll tell me I'm relentless, but you'll flip over and rub my head. So I win. So it is the same thing as a toddler. Now I don't do this. I'm not very needy, so don't think of that. But sometimes I want a head rub. But it's the same idea, right? But if my husband goes, no, good night, and there's like a tone to it, I'm like, fine. And then I just go to bed in 2 seconds, you know? So it's testing boundaries. Like if I know I whine and I get the head rub, why would I stop asking? Now as an adult, I know I don't need one every night. I don't want one every night. As a toddler, they don't. It's like, well, if you're willing to show up with a brownie every night at 3 a.m., I'm gonna eat it. You know what I mean? So it's just, I think boundaries are something that scare parents because it seems like unnatural to have boundaries and consequences. And sometimes consistency can be super hard. You're tired. You're just like, oh my gosh, go to bed already. For the love of the Lord, I'll lay on the floor, you know? And you just don't know what else to do. But I think that consistency is what is so important. I'll tell clients, like, if you were co-sleeping for 3 years and you think one night you're just going to magically put your kid in the bed, good luck. You know, here's how we're going to do this. You're not welcome in my bed, but you're welcome in the sleeping bag on the floor in my room. Guess what gets real hard and pretty uncomfortable after about a week? That sleeping bag on the floor, because you're not making it like the Taj Mahal. It is a sleeping bag on a hard carpet, right? And after a couple days, it's like your squishy bed is over there and it's way nicer and you have all your animals and it's cozy and a sound machine is dark, or you can sleep on this stale sleeping bag, right? And after a couple days, kids go, well, I'm not going to get in your bed. And this stinks, so I'm going back to my room. You know what I mean? And you sort of naturally let them make the choice to go back to the room where it's a bit more comfortable, if that makes sense. I know that's a long-winded answer.
No, it's great.
Trying to explain it in the mind of a toddler is like, parents have to be consistent, and then they have to reset expectations once whatever that unfortunate event is happens, and be consistent to go back to what they were doing and know that they know what's best. A toddler never is going to want to be like, yes, I'll happily get out of your bed. Like, why would I? It's cozy and comfy. Well, you're not welcome in my bed, and that's our choice, but the best you're going to get's on the floor, and it's your choice to decide whether you sleep there or not, you know?
Yep. Well, and I think as a parent myself, I think certainly these sleep challenges have happened for us too. And I find myself sometimes struggling with the balance of like, I don't want my kids to cry, right? Like that feels uncomfortable. But like sometimes, I mean, kids do cry, but I also want them to get good sleep and for me to get good sleep. And I don't want them to struggle falling asleep either. So how do we get them to fall asleep peacefully when we're
Yeah.
talking about
So
toddlers?
yeah, no, totally. So from a toddler standpoint, there really isn't a lot of crying in sleep training, quote unquote, a toddler, because it's not sleep training. They know how.
Mm-hmm,
They're
mm-hmm,
choosing not to, right? So people always think that they can use a traditional sleep training method like interval-based check-ins for a toddler. Newsflash, they'll cry for 5 hours. It's not going to work
Yep.
because they don't, it's not that they need the skill, it's that they want you to do whatever it is, lay in bed, rock them, hold them, whatever, right? So as parents, first, you've got to isolate the timing and make sure that's correct. Second, you've got to have a good, consistent routine. Kids understand predictability. We're going to take a bath, then we're going to read a book. I use little timers. I actually have to send the link to one to a new client that's starting. And I'm like, hey, 5 minutes for bath. When the timer goes off, the water goes out. They can still sit and play, but that's the wind down of that transition to the next thing. The books, we're going to read and cuddle for 5 minutes. That goes off. Now you're in your bed. So a visual transition versus like, Alexa, that timer for 5 minutes. The kids don't understand that, but this is like a okay. Right. So having a consistent, repetitious routine gives kids confidence in what's coming next and predictability in that routine, wherever you are, whether you're in a hotel, whether you're home, whether you're at grandma's, like doing the same thing every night becomes a sense of comfort for kids. Right. And then you're playing a little bit of the easiest way to explain this is kind of chicken with a toddler that first bedtime. And I'll tell you what I mean. What do they want? Because every kid's different. And what are you as a parent willing to do? Right. So generally, in almost every client we work with at the toddler age, even if a parent doesn't want to be in the room, they have to be in the room because you're the thing they want. So parents thinking they can do like interval-based check-ins or like let the kid cry or come back or tell them they're just going to go to the bathroom and stuff, like the kids are just going to freak out. And then sometimes they get so upset they can like vomit and you have to deal with that because they're just so like upset from crying. Like you don't have to do that. Kids want you, you're the reward. But the analogy I use, have you ever had fruit striped gum?
Yes.
Okay, what does it taste like when you first chew it?
Fruity.
And you get a tattoo and there's like
Yes.
5 colors.
Yeah.
What does it taste like after 2 minutes?
Nothing. It
So what
tastes
do you do?
terrible. Spit it out.
Boom. Toddlers are fruit striped gum. You are fruit striped gum to them immediately upon insertion in the mouth, right? It's fruity, it's juicy, I want more of it. But the minute that that gum tastes like Amazon boxes, right? You're going to spit it out. That's how you have to look at toddler sleep training. When you're going in, you're rubbing their back and you're rubbing their head and you're doing the thing and you're laying next to them and you're doing all this stuff, you're fruit striped gum. Why would they stop asking for that? But the second that you become muted in response, very consistent in your response, very matter of fact, very boundary, and you turn into fruit striped gum after 2 minutes, most kids spit you out, right? So it takes about a week to effectively sleep train a toddler. And every toddler is going to have different protests, different desires, and to keep it general, which I'm trying to do for today to be at least helpful for parents who might be like, I could figure this out, right? Is like, what are they looking for? And then what are you willing to do? Most cases, 9 times out of 9 times, you're in the room with them until they fall asleep. And your response, the boundary, the consequences, and the way in which you escalate those consequences are what shift and shape the behavior, right? If your kid was sitting at a restaurant and they whipped peas across the room, you wouldn't be like, good job, Billy. Do you want more peas? You'd be like, dude, you can't do it. You just threw peas at this lady sitting over there. And she got butter all over her dress, right? Can't do that. Don't do that again. And they learn pretty quick from your tone or also just the reaction that you had that was an unacceptable choice, right? You don't have to like escalate your voice with kids when you're trying to sleep train them, but you have to set boundaries. Like you can't sit and go, I want a brownie for bedtime. It's like, well, you're not going to get a brownie for bedtime. So stop asking, it's just not an appropriate request. But if you want me to stay in here until you're asleep, then you need to lay down. It's not a hard ask. So it's the child's choice to lay down or not. And if they do, great, you're there. If they don't, there's a consequence. And a lot of times it's involved in like an escalation of consequences where a reward to an ask only changes behavior when the consequence outweighs the reward, right? So a lot of times parents will try to sleep train, but there's no consequence to choices. It's just continuing escalation. So you're like, for 2 hours, you're fighting with a toddler trying to get them to go to bed. You eventually blow up. They're freaking out and crying and everybody's upset. And then you just do whatever to get them down. Well, what changes behavior? They want you. They want you to sit. They want you to be present. But after you set the boundary that says, I will sit here, but only when you make the choice to lay quietly or just to lay down. It doesn't always have to be quiet because sometimes they're singing and they're self-soothing in that way. They just want your presence there, but you're not like sitting there playing patty cake with them. Like you can use some vocal engagement and sometimes touch. And we talk a lot more about this in our programs, right? But like there's an aspect of a little bit of kind of, as I said, you're sort of playing chicken. Like, what do you want? What am I as a parent willing to do? And how do we meet in the middle? And be firm on it, right? And sometimes I'll tell parents, I'm like, look, if they're standing up and reaching for you or pawing at you or whatever, like that's just not a desirable behavior. You need to get up and, step out for a minute. And when you open that door back up after 10 seconds or a minute or what have you, depends on the situation, right? Your response is, do you want me to sit? Do you want mommy? Then lay down. And you wait. And I think that's the hardest part for parents is the awkward silence at the door because they want to just like fix it and minimize it. But again, it's not, prolonged crying, but all of this is up to your child's choice. And that's the difference. It's empowerment. People look at sleep training and it's like, you're not sleep training. We're trying to empower them, give them confidence, help them feel like they're making choices. Do you want this book or this book? Do you want these pajamas or these pajamas? Do you want to brush your teeth or do you want me to do it for you? Most kids are not going to pick mommy brushing their teeth, but they get the choice. And then throughout this whole bedtime routine, they're feeling like very puffy chested, right? Do you want mommy to stay and sit or do you want me to leave? Get in the bed. That's not a choice. Do you want me to sit in the chair or are you good to go to bed? Your choice. And it's their choice to say, I want you to stay, but you as a parent have to be able to stick to the boundary that you set based on the unique situation. Sometimes I do have parents that will do the first night lying next to their kid. It depends on the severity of the attachment and what's going on. I've got a client starting tonight that's slept on the couch with the dad for 2.5 years every night. So it's like, now we're getting a kid into a new bed and dad and separation. Like these things are very complex and they do take time. In the general capacity though, it's the same foundations. Like, here's the boundary. Here's what we're willing to do. Here's what we're willing to stick to. Here's what you have to do. Here's my job. And then you slowly build their confidence. And as that same time, their skills building, and the consequences to change a behavior are appropriately balanced, right? Along with rewards. People are like, my 2-year-old doesn't understand rewards. I'm like, yes, they do. Yeah, they absolutely do. And it just depends. You got to figure out what type, in what capacity, right? But positive praise, words, stickers, like they know actually very smartly what they're doing. I have a 14-month-old right now that knows they can launch the pacifiers out of their crib and go, Daddy, and then launch the pacifiers. So even at 14 months, they know what they're doing because he stares at the monitor, yells daddy, and then throws the pacifier because he knows daddy's going to come in, give it back to him, and then rock him to sleep. So they're starting tonight. Wish me luck on that one. But yeah, so it's just, I think it's just the understanding of like, it's a little bit of give and take that first night, but like sticking to the boundary and sticking to like that escalation of like, I'm sorry, dude, like this is what you're willing to get, take it or leave it. And over the course of about a week, you go from fruit striped gum over here to like cardboard box over here because you start to mute what they're doing. And then kids go, why am I even asking for you? Like, I'm not getting anything out of this. There's no enjoyment on my end. Like, what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think, this is all so hard. And I love your analogies of how to handle it and how to move through and looking at the kids' behavior because their behavior always has a reward, right? Or some type of natural consequence, whether it's positive or negative that comes from it. And so we have to assess like, what are we really doing there and what's the outcome? And to know that when we're sleep training, it doesn't, or getting a kid to be able to sleep by themselves, it doesn't have to last forever. Because I think sometimes parents are like, I can't do a month of this. And it's like, well, hopefully you won't, unless there's something medical going on, right? Like this isn't going to be something that lasts forever. Once you lose your novelness, like you said, that you're going to be able to move through and be able to do it independently, which I love. So what tips or tricks do you think just parents in general should know for this? We've kind of talked about different tips and tricks that you have, but what do you think are the most helpful ones?
So assess the right schedule and the right nap time. Okay. If your child is in daycare and nap time is fixed, your bedtime is fixed, whether you like it or not. Okay. So understand the timing and then work backwards to the timing. try to begin by watching daytime behavior. I can actually fix bedtime with daytime behavior fixed first, much easier. Okay. Typical sleep training of a toddler takes about 7 days if done properly. Okay. And you see a drastic improvement after about day 5 or 6, but you're changing behaviors here and they're going to keep pushing until they start to realize they're not going to get what's on the other end. So just to set expectations, right? It's about a week for a toddler. Okay. You have to understand that like there's a balance in getting there, you know what I mean? And so understanding it takes about a week, and then the way in which you back into it, right? I'm trying to think how to explain it easily. Like starting with the daytime and watching, like if your kid's eating lunch, okay, and they throw their apple slices. No. Well, that's not a desirable behavior, right?
Mhm.
So what do most parents do? They go, Billy, don't throw your apple slices. Let me wash them off for you. Here you go, buddy. What does Billy do again? Launches them across the kitchen, right? Billy's probably just pissed about something else, but the only thing he can control is the ability to launch his puffs or his apples across the kitchen. As parents, we're kind of rewarding that by giving the apples back, right?
Mhm.
Whereas instead you go, all right, well, if you're done with your apples, which you obviously are because you're throwing them, then that tells me you're not hungry. So we're going to skip snack today and we're going to wait to eat again until dinner. And guess what's going to happen in 2 hours? Little Billy's going to ask for some goldfish. And what do you have to say as a parent? No, sorry. You threw your apples at lunch, so we're not going to eat again until dinner. Okay. Right. And that's a boundary. You, Billy, made the choice to throw your apples. The natural consequence is you told me you were not hungry. So we will then eat a nice full dinner and skip snack today. Because if you didn't eat your apples, that tells me you're not hungry. We're not going to do snack, right? Now you have to use what's age appropriate. An 18-month-old isn't going to necessarily understand that as much as a 3-year-old, right? But in the same behaviors, you're watching for that kind of stuff, right? Like in the daytime, there's often 2 things that happen. Behaviors that can be corrected, right? Which as parents, I think we all try to do a good job of, right? But then there's also rewards in what we're doing as like the response back to our children, and trying to balance or listen for the reward to a child, right? Which looks like, can we go to the park? Can I watch Bluey? Will you play cards with me? Can we take a bath? Can I do? Will I have? Can I eat? Right? Like whenever a kid's asking something, in their mind, that's generally something they want. So it's a reward, right? In some way, but it's what they desire. Will you play dolls with me? Will we go to the park? Can you go for a walk? Can I have a snack? Can I have a cookie? Can I watch TV? Right? Like those are rewards to a kid. And it's like, if you're paying attention to the undesirable behavior, right? And then paying attention to what the desirable asks are, you can usually find a really good mix of things that are natural consequences. Like, I'm sorry, we can't go to the park today because you didn't take a good nap, right? And so you start to, again, it's like age appropriate. And then as kids grow, one of the things I do with toddlers a lot is I get like a little cup full of rice. Okay. And I fill it with popsicle sticks. And sometimes the red are consequences and the green are good. So when you're during the day and maybe you do something unsolicited, like take the garbage out or help your sister down the stairs or whatever, like that was kind of unsolicited, you can do things like, oh, you get to pick a stick, and the stick is the dessert of your choice. That's a reward. But like tonight, if bedtime's a nightmare and you were freaking out at grandma, no TV tomorrow. Sorry, bud.
Mhm.
That one's on you. Because all of these things are things that as toddlers, they're in control of. Now, there's emotional regulation and the ability for them to cognitively understand. So the tips I'm sharing are a range of toddlers from 2 to through 4, which is almost 5, right? Like there's a lot of development that happens at that point, but
Mhm.
like the foundations are kind of the same. Like children have choices and you're building a boundary, and then they're able to make the choice. Like, do I want this book or this book? I want that book over there. That's not a choice.
Mhm.
And so as parents, like we try to help them say, like, do you want this or this? I want that book. Okay, well, then we're just not going to read tonight. You put it down and you walk away and you move on to the next item. And then you know what happens? Your toddler goes, fine, we'll read Bluey, right?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
they realize that the boundary is firm, you're not going to break it, and that ultimately they still want to read. They were just hoping through their protest that they would pick something else. And sometimes I don't even think they want something else. I just think that they like the idea of testing boundaries.
Mhm.
And it might be the
Well,
only thing they can control.
hmm Yeah, and developmentally, I mean, that totally makes sense. Like we are testing boundaries even through adulthood, right? We're like, how firm is this, right? Somebody says at a grad sale, this is $25. You're like, well, you take 15, right? I mean, I think we are still doing that in through adulthood, but I think it's good to look at in what ways during the day we're allowing things to happen that are then determining our structure or consistency in the nighttime, right? Like we can't be a free for all during the day and not have very many rules or boundaries and then expect that at bedtime our kids are going to go to bed easily, that
Yeah.
they're going to accept that. So it's a whole daytime and nighttime program, whole 24 hours, right? Hopefully we're sleeping in there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
looking at the whole perspective of that, and I think allowing kids to take responsibility for their choices is also really important because that I think helps them to be more resilient, right? It helps them to understand where the line is, but then also helps them to learn how to bounce back faster. I know that in my house, like if I set a boundary with something, my toddler will be like, I want a beef stick. And it's like past dinner time, we've done bath, we've done, the jammies and we're in bed. And I'm like, no, buddy, sorry, you can have that in the morning. And if I remember like there were times where I was like, oh, well, maybe he's hungry, right? And I'm considering that. And he like picked up on that. So then he's asking for a beef stick every time. Now I say, no, you can have it in the morning. And he's like, okay. So, I mean, it does really work to set the boundaries, but it is so hard
Yeah.
sometimes to be in that place.
Oh my gosh, totally. And it's like to your point, age appropriate, right? Like every kid's going to be different in like what they understand, but make no mistake, they understand what they're doing to a degree, right? But it's just, I think there's confidence in empowering them to be the one to make the choices,
Mhm.
but also understanding that like they're making the choice to freak out. You're willing to sit, they have to chill. You know what I mean? They've got to learn to chill and like learn to regulate. Like one of the products that I've used with many toddlers that I love, um, it's sitting on my nightstand here in the office because I do it myself. It's called a Zenimal. It's a meditation device for kids.
Mhm.
And I met the founder years ago when I ended up finding out I had a rare form of stomach cancer and my kids thought I was going to die, which as a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old is kind of hard to like process, but they
Yeah.
also, I mean, we didn't tell them a ton, but they also knew mommy was sick and, all kinds of stuff. And I'm fine now, but we found that Zenimal when it first came out to help them with mindset and to
Mhm.
calm at bedtime so that it wasn't an anxious time for them. Because if they know change is coming or they sense that something is different, right? Like I was in the hospital for 10 days, mommy was gone. Like,
Mhm.
and so they sense something's wrong. They sense something different. Like there's an aspect of that where it was like, okay, I could put the turtle on and they could fall asleep with like a positive, child-friendly meditation that to this day, my kids are 8 and 10 and still use it every single night. And, my nephew stayed over this weekend and he's 11 and he's like, can I have one of those? I have a couple from Anna in the closet. And I was like, yes, you can take one home. And he's like, I just love her voice. It's so soothing. So it's like, I think if you can teach kids even at 2 to just
Mhm.
listen along to that and
Mhm.
do it with mom or dad in the bedtime. Like
Mhm.
I incorporate this animal into a lot of the toddler plans I do because they're doing it together. They're
Mhm.
doing it as a sense of like calming of the mind. But frankly, like, dude, it feels awesome. My husband and I used to joke because when they were younger, like we would both fall asleep in their rooms at 7:30 at night doing the meditation. And my husband come in, he's like, dude, get up. It's like 8:15, but I would pass out because I was so relaxed doing it with them just as a part of our bedtime routine. Like they weren't asking me to stay. I just did it because I liked the fact that I got 15 minutes of meditation too. So I think it's looking at there's so many different cool tools that can help in this process that doesn't have to make it such a painful
Mhm.
thing because I think your kids will honestly feel better because they have the skill to do it. And when they sleep better, they eat better. Their emotions are better, right? Everybody's better because how you feel in the morning from being up 4 times is how your kid feels too, and I try to explain that to parents, like they just show it in different ways.
Mhm.
And I think there's
Absolutely.
traumas and there's true events that can happen that can really impact sleep, um, from as little as like nightmares. Night terrors are often overtired. So if you have a child who has a night terror as a toddler, it's 99% of the time it's overtired related. Your schedule's off somewhere, your kid is overtired going to bed. So fixing overtired fixes night terrors on almost every client I work with. Nightmares, you've got to get to the root of the problem. And so sometimes like giving kids an outlet, there could be trauma at home. They could be coming from a difficult situation, or like I've worked with split families where like there's really good structure here and nothing over here. Sometimes it's giving kids just an outlet of creative freedom at an age appropriate age of 3. Like they're not writing in a journal, but sometimes like I give kids in my house and kids I work with journals so that they can write like pictures or messages. And then if the book is out, that means that that's something I need to look at, right? So like my son is older now, and if he writes a message, I can write back to him and it's very private and there's not a sense of like, I got to talk to mommy about this thing, right? It's like you can write your question and I'll write you an answer and then I'll just tuck it back under your pillow and you could read it when we go to bed, right? And my daughter's a little younger. I mean, she can write, but it doesn't look great, but she's getting there. But, even with kids, like they can draw. So maybe they can draw an emotion and then leave the book out and then I can see it and I can leave them a little message back. Like you can build communication in as well to help your kid feel if they're going through a traumatic event or a loss of a family member or something, right? Like I know it just, even with me being sick, that was traumatic. My son would sleep on the steps every night to hear my voice, to make sure I wasn't dead. Try to explain that to a 5-year-old. Buddy, mommy's not dead. I'm just watching TV in the living room, but my son thought I was going to be dead the next morning when he woke up. And that, like, as a parent, you're just like, oh my gosh, like this is really deep at 5, but it happens. Like a lot of people get cancer,
Yeah.
And so that for me was like, oh my gosh, like, and the work I've done for 10 years with clients is like, there's so many different situations that every family has and traumas and events that happen. Right. And having that experience for me made it very eye-opening that like, how can I support my son? What we started to do? Go to bed at 8:30 at night. My husband and I go upstairs and we read a book or we watch TV, and now we're upstairs. So we're on the same floor as our kids. We don't necessarily go to bed, though we're both early birds. So we are asleep at 9 o'clock. But before we used to go downstairs for a half hour, and I'm like, well, why don't we just do this upstairs and read a book or watch TV or something? And that made my son feel confident because he could hear us. And then he got over it. You know what I mean? And so sometimes we do have to make accommodations that are reasonable, but every kid's got, different things going on. Like we all have stuff,
Yeah, absolutely. And kids are going through things too, exactly like you said. Thank you so much, Courtney. This has been so enlightening. I appreciate all of your words of wisdom and all your feedback.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I hope it's helpful to someone. And there's like so much stuff that we share easily and freely out on our website. I'm always happy to give free information and to coach parents through, because I know it can be like overwhelming. Like, do I need help or do I just need to like tweak a couple things, So we're always happy to provide insight and to help.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll include your website on our show notes. So thanks for
Awesome.
today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks again, Courtney. That was all fantastic information. I don't know about you, but I learned so many things. I'm so excited to go home and try on my 2-year-old to see if we can get some better sleep around our house. With that, I will say thank you so much for your time today. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Also, keep emails coming with show topic requests to accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Have a fantastic day. Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.